At 2:17 a.m., while an entire apartment building slept behind locked doors and drawn curtains, while televisions hummed softly in darkened living rooms and phones lay silent on bedside tables, a young woman was fighting for her life in a cramped bedroom on the third floor, desperately struggling against an unseen presence, desperately trying to breathe through fear and pain, desperately hoping that someone, anyone, would hear her before it was too late. Later, investigators would discover that at least 7 people were awake in that building during those final minutes, scrolling through social media, watching late-night movies, sending messages, and drifting in and out of sleep, completely unaware that just a few feet away, separated only by thin walls and closed doors, a murder was unfolding in slow, horrifying silence. And when the truth finally came out, the question that haunted everyone was not only who killed her, but how an entire building could sleep through a life being taken. Before we dive into this chilling story, take a quiet moment to support this channel by liking this video and subscribing, because stories like this deserve to be told with depth, honesty, and respect for the lives affected. And your support helps us continue uncovering the truth behind cases that were almost forgotten. This story begins in Riverdale Heights, a quiet suburban apartment complex outside Sacramento, California, a place where nothing ever seemed to happen, where neighbors nodded politely in the hallway, where weekend barbecues and shared laundry rooms created an illusion of safety and familiarity, and where residents believed that danger was something that happened somewhere else, to someone else, in some other town. The Willow Creek Apartments consisted of 3 identical beige buildings, each with 4 floors, thin walls, narrow hallways, and a reputation for being affordable, peaceful, and family-friendly. Parents felt comfortable letting their children play in the courtyard. Young professionals rented units without fear. Elderly tenants had lived there for decades. It was the kind of place people chose when they wanted stability. 22-year-old Hannah Miller had moved into Building C, apartment 312, only 8 months earlier after graduating from community college with dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse. She worked long shifts at a nearby medical clinic, volunteered on weekends, and spent most evenings studying or talking to her mother on FaceTime. Friends describe her as gentle, optimistic, and deeply trusting, someone who believed that kindness would always be returned, someone who rarely imagined that people could intentionally cause harm. Her small one-bedroom apartment reflected her personality, with soft pastel curtains, neatly stacked textbooks, motivational quotes on the wall, and framed photos of her family lining the shelves. Hannah had chosen Willow Creek specifically because it felt safe. She liked knowing that neighbors were nearby, that people were always coming and going, that someone would notice if something was wrong. She often told her mother that she felt protected there, surrounded by ordinary people living ordinary lives, far away from crime headlines and police sirens. Tragically, that sense of safety would become the cruelest illusion of all. On the night of March 14th, Hannah returned home around 9:45 p.m. after finishing a late shift at the clinic. Surveillance footage later confirmed that she parked her car in her usual spot, waved briefly at a neighbor walking a dog, and entered Building C carrying a small grocery bag and her backpack. Nothing about her behavior suggested fear, urgency, or distress. She looked exactly like what she was, a tired young woman looking forward to a quiet night in her own bed. Inside her apartment, she prepared a simple dinner, responded to a few messages, and spoke with her younger sister on the phone for nearly 40 minutes, laughing about childhood memories and discussing plans for an upcoming family visit. Phone records showed that the call ended at 10:58 p.m., with Hannah promising to send photos of her new apartment decorations the next day. It was the last confirmed conversation she would ever have. Sometime after 11:30 p.m., neighbors in nearby units reported hearing faint noises through the walls, though at the time, none of them considered it unusual. One tenant later admitted hearing what sounded like muffled voices. Another recalled brief thumping sounds. A third thought she heard someone crying softly. But in a building where televisions played, music drifted, and people moved furniture late at night, these sounds blended into the background of everyday life. No one called security. No one knocked. No one asked if everything was okay. Psychologists would later explain that this phenomenon, known as normalcy bias, causes people to interpret unusual events as harmless when they occur in familiar environments, especially when acknowledging danger would require emotional effort or intervention. In simple terms, people unconsciously convince themselves that nothing is wrong because believing otherwise feels uncomfortable. What investigators would uncover later was that between 11:42 p.m. and 12:19 a.m., Hannah was involved in a violent struggle inside her bedroom, a struggle that unfolded in painful stages rather than in a single explosive moment. Evidence showed overturned furniture, broken picture frames, defensive wounds on her arms, and deep scratches on the wooden floor near the bed, indicating that she fought desperately to escape. This was not a sudden attack. This was prolonged terror. Yet during this entire time, life continued normally around her. On the floor below, a couple watched a movie until midnight. Across the hall, a college student studied for exams with headphones on. Next door, an elderly man slept with his television on. Down the hallway, 2 roommates played video games until early morning. 7 people, investigators confirmed, were awake or partially awake while Hannah was being attacked. None of them intervened. Shortly after 12:30 a.m., the building fell mostly silent. Whatever had happened inside apartment 312 had reached its final stage. Hannah's phone, which had been active minutes earlier, went dark. Her smartwatch stopped recording movement. Her heart stopped shortly after. But no one knew. No one checked. No one knocked. No one imagined that behind one closed door, a life had just ended. The next morning, March 15th, began like any other at Willow Creek. Residents left for work. Children waited for school buses. Maintenance staff emptied trash bins. Hannah's mother sent her good morning message at 7:12 a.m. and received no reply. At first, she assumed her daughter was busy. By noon, concern began to grow. By evening, fear had set in. And by the time police finally forced open the door to apartment 312 at 9:43 p.m., nearly 21 hours after Hannah's last confirmed activity, they stepped into a scene that would haunt every officer present for the rest of their careers. What they found inside that bedroom would raise devastating questions about trust, responsibility, and silence. And what they would soon discover about the people living just feet away would make this case even more disturbing. If you're still with me right now, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about safety, community, and the thin line between comfort and catastrophe. Shortly, we will talk about how investigators begin to uncover who was inside Hannah's apartment that night, how he got in without forcing the door, and why the people closest to her never suspected the danger growing quietly in her life. And when the truth about her final hours starts to emerge, it will become clear that this murder did not begin that night. It began weeks earlier. When detectives first examined the entrance to apartment 312, one detail immediately unsettled them more than the overturned furniture or the shattered picture frames, because the front door showed absolutely no signs of forced entry, no broken lock, no damaged frame, no splintered wood, and no evidence that anyone had been compelled inside against their will. The lock functioned perfectly. The deadbolt had been engaged. The door had been closed carefully after the crime. To experienced investigators, this meant only one thing. Hannah had either willingly allowed someone into her apartment that night, or she had known the person well enough to feel safe leaving her door unlocked for them. Either possibility shifted the direction of the entire investigation away from random violence and towards something far more personal. Inside the apartment, forensic teams worked meticulously for nearly 14 hours, documenting every disturbed object, every smear, every fiber, and every microscopic trace left behind. Blood spatter patterns indicated that the attack had begun near the bedroom doorway, suggesting that Hannah had initially tried to retreat or escape when she realized she was in danger. The distribution of broken items showed that she had been pushed backward toward the bed, where the struggle intensified. Defensive wounds on her forearms and palms confirmed that she had fought aggressively, clawing and striking in an attempt to protect herself. DNA recovered from under her fingernails indicated that she had managed to scratch her attacker multiple times, leaving behind critical biological evidence. Yet the most unsettling discovery was the lack of chaos in the rest of the apartment, because the living room, kitchen, and bathroom appeared almost untouched, as if nothing unusual had occurred there at all. Dishes sat neatly in the sink. Her backpack rested against the couch. A half-finished cup of tea remained on the coffee table. It was as though violence had been contained deliberately within the bedroom, suggesting that Hannah had trusted her visitor enough to allow them into her personal space before realizing she was in danger. This detail alone eliminated many theories and narrowed the suspect pool dramatically. Phone records soon revealed that Hannah had exchanged dozens of messages in the weeks leading up to her death, with a single contact saved under the name M, a person she communicated with far more frequently than anyone else, including her family. The messages ranged from supportive encouragement to emotional vulnerability to subtle tension, indicating a relationship that was intense, complicated, and possibly unstable. Investigators learned that M referred to Marcus Reed, a 24-year-old delivery driver who lived in Building C, apartment 209, directly below Hannah's unit. Marcus had moved into Willow Creek nearly a year earlier and had quickly become known as friendly, helpful, and reliable, someone who offered to carry groceries, fix loose door handles, and lend tools to neighbors. He and Hannah met in the laundry room shortly after she moved in, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared frustrations about work. Over time, their casual friendship deepened into something more emotionally dependent, though friends later testified that Hannah never considered him a romantic partner, despite his growing attachment to her. Text messages showed that Marcus often expressed insecurity, jealousy, and fear of losing Hannah's attention, especially when she spent time with coworkers or talked about future plans that did not involve him. He frequently asked where she was, who she was with, and when she would be home, framing his questions as concern while subtly exerting control. Behavioral psychologists later identified this pattern as emotional surveillance, a common early warning sign of possessive behavior that often escalates into violence when boundaries are challenged. On the evening of March 14th, Marcus had sent Hannah a message at 10:41 p.m., asking if he could come upstairs to talk because he was feeling overwhelmed and confused. Hannah replied at 10:47 p.m. that she was tired, but that he could stop by for a few minutes. Surveillance footage confirmed that Marcus entered Building C at 11:28 p.m. carrying nothing but his phone and keys. He did not leave again until 1:03 a.m., nearly 90 minutes after Hannah's phone went silent. When detectives interviewed Marcus the following day, he appeared calm, cooperative, and deeply shaken by the news of Hannah's death. He claimed that he had visited her briefly, discussed personal issues, and left around midnight after she asked for space. He insisted that she had been alive, unharmed, and in good spirits when he departed. He even produced text messages showing her thanking him for checking in, though forensic analysis later revealed that those messages had been deleted and reconstructed through backup data. What Marcus did not know at the time was that investigators already had reason to doubt his account. Security footage showed him pacing the hallway outside Hannah's apartment several times before entering, behavior consistent with internal conflict or anxiety. Audio sensors installed in the building's ventilation system, designed for fire safety monitoring, had inadvertently recorded faint vibrations during the night, which analysts later identified as consistent with prolonged physical struggle originating from apartment 312. These timestamps align precisely with Marcus's presence inside. More disturbingly, medical examiners determined that Hannah's injuries were consistent with someone she knew, because victims are statistically more likely to fight harder and longer against familiar attackers due to emotional shock and disbelief. The hesitation to accept betrayal often delays escape attempts, increasing vulnerability. Investigators also discovered that Marcus had accessed Hannah's social media accounts on multiple occasions using shared Wi-Fi networks, suggesting that he had been monitoring her private communications. Deleted browser histories on his phone revealed searches about restraining someone without leaving marks, how to calm someone during panic, and how to clean blood from fabric. Though circumstantial, these findings painted a deeply troubling picture. When confronted with this evidence, Marcus's demeanor shifted subtly. His posture tightened. His voice grew flatter. He stopped making eye contact. He insisted that the searches were curiosity-driven and unrelated. He claimed that Hannah had shared her passwords willingly. He portrayed himself as misunderstood rather than malicious. However, forensic results soon delivered the blow that would unravel his story completely. DNA recovered from under Hannah's fingernails matched Marcus with near-perfect certainty. Blood traces on his jacket, which he initially claimed were from a work accident, were confirmed to be hers. Microscopic fibers from his hoodie were embedded in her bedding. The case against him grew stronger by the day. Yet despite overwhelming evidence, Marcus continued denying responsibility, insisting that someone else must have entered the apartment after he left, exploiting the unlocked door. He argued that the building's thin walls made it impossible to determine exact sources of noise. He claimed he had been framed by coincidence. Then investigators uncovered something that changed everything. A voice recording. Hidden deep within Hannah's phone storage, buried among system files, was a partially corrupted audio clip timestamped at 11:56 p.m., recorded accidentally when her smartwatch activated during elevated heart rate. It contained muffled sounds, a woman's voice crying, a man's voice whispering, and words that would become central to the trial. Words that suggested Hannah had known exactly who was hurting her, and had tried, even in terror, to make sure the truth survived. If you're still watching, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and leave your thoughts below, because what happens next reveals how one hidden recording shattered a carefully constructed lie and exposed the psychology of betrayal in its most terrifying form. Sit tight, because we are about to tell you what Hannah captured in her final minutes, analyze how investigators decoded it, and reveal how Marcus's past began to surface in ways no one expected. And when his history finally comes to light, it will prove that this tragedy was not sudden. It was inevitable. When digital forensic analysts first recovered the corrupted audio file from Hannah Miller's smartwatch backup system, they did not immediately recognize its significance, because at first listen it sounded like nothing more than static, distorted breathing, and faint background noise that could easily have been dismissed as technological malfunction. However, experienced investigators understood that in cases involving extreme physical distress, wearable devices often activate unintentionally, recording fragments of sound that later become crucial pieces of evidence. After isolating the file and subjecting it to advanced enhancement software, specialists began reconstructing its fragmented frequencies, filtering out environmental interference, and amplifying subtle vocal patterns that would otherwise remain buried beneath digital noise. As the sound quality improved, a chilling sequence of events slowly emerged, revealing not only what had happened inside apartment 312, but also Hannah's awareness of her situation and her desperate attempt to document it. The first discernible sound was rapid breathing, uneven and strained, accompanied by soft sobbing that grew louder over time, suggesting that Hannah had already been restrained or injured when the recording began. A few seconds later, a male voice entered the frame, low and tense, repeatedly urging her to calm down and stop making this harder, language that psychologists immediately recognized as manipulative de-escalation tactics commonly used by individuals attempting to maintain control during violent confrontations. Then came the moment that changed everything. Through layers of distortion, Hannah's voice could be heard clearly enough to make out a sentence that would become central to the prosecution's case. Her voice, trembling yet remarkably focused, whispered, "Marcus, please, you're hurting me, this isn't you," a statement that confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt that she recognized her attacker and was trying to appeal to his emotional identity in a final attempt to de-escalate the situation. Experts later explained that victims often resort to this strategy when attacked by someone they know, hoping to remind the aggressor of their shared history in order to trigger empathy and halt violence. Following this, the recording captured a shift in tone that investigators found deeply disturbing, because Marcus's voice, previously strained and anxious, became eerily calm, almost detached as he responded, "You don't understand. I'm doing this because I love you. You're not supposed to leave me." This statement revealed the emotional core of the crime, exposing a mindset rooted in possessiveness, entitlement, and distorted attachment rather than sudden rage. It was no longer a mystery of opportunity or circumstance. It was a crime driven by control. Behavioral analysts who reviewed the recording identified clear markers of what is known as intimate partner fixation, a psychological condition in which an individual becomes obsessed with maintaining emotional dominance over another person, interpreting independence as betrayal and rejection as humiliation. In such cases, violence is often rationalized internally as preservation of the relationship rather than destruction of it, a tragic cognitive distortion that allows perpetrators to justify extreme actions without perceiving themselves as villains. The recording continued for nearly 4 minutes, documenting escalating physical struggle, muffled impacts, Hannah's labored breathing, and repeated pleas for help that gradually weakened as her strength faded. At one point, she could be heard gasping, "Someone will hear, please," a heartbreaking acknowledgement of her hope that proximity might save her. Marcus responded with words that would later devastate the community. "No one's listening. They never do." That sentence would echo throughout the investigation, symbolizing not only his cruelty, but also the collective failure of those who had been close enough to intervene. When detectives confronted Marcus with the enhanced recording, his emotional composure fractured for the first time. He initially claimed the voice was manipulated. Then he argued it was taken out of context. Finally, when presented with biometric voice analysis confirming a match, he fell silent, staring at the interrogation table for nearly 15 minutes without speaking. Observers noted that this silence marked the collapse of his psychological defense mechanisms because he could no longer reinterpret reality to protect his self-image. Further investigation into Marcus's background revealed that Hannah had not been his first fixation. Former coworkers and acquaintances came forward describing patterns of intense emotional dependency, possessiveness, and retaliatory behavior after perceived rejection. One ex-girlfriend reported that he had once threatened self-harm when she attempted to leave. Another described him monitoring her online activity obsessively. These testimonies established a behavioral trajectory that made the murder tragically predictable in hindsight. Digital records showed that in the weeks before Hannah's death, Marcus had grown increasingly unstable, sending long emotional messages, expressing fear of abandonment, and accusing her of prioritizing her future over him. He had begun interpreting ordinary independence as betrayal, a cognitive distortion that slowly eroded his emotional regulation. Experts explain that when such individuals feel their control slipping, they often escalate to desperate measures in an attempt to reassert dominance. Prosecutors built their case around this psychological narrative, demonstrating that the crime was not impulsive but the result of progressive emotional deterioration combined with entitlement. The recording, DNA evidence, digital surveillance, and witness testimony formed an interconnected web of proof that left little room for doubt. Yet despite overwhelming evidence, Marcus's defense team prepared an aggressive strategy centered on emotional instability, arguing that he had acted under extreme psychological distress rather than malicious intent. They sought to reframe the murder as a tragic mental health crisis rather than a calculated act of control, hoping to reduce culpability and sentencing. As the trial approached, the community of Riverdale Heights found itself divided between shock, anger, and guilt. Residents struggled to reconcile the friendly neighbor they had known with the voice they now heard in court. Parents wondered how many warning signs they had missed. Friends questioned whether they could have protected Hannah if they had been more attentive. And perhaps most haunting of all was the realization that Hannah had not died in silence. She had spoken. She had recorded. She had documented the truth, even as her life slipped away. Hannah Hannah's parents established a foundation in her name dedicated to raising awareness about emotional abuse and coercive control, partnering with schools and universities to educate young people about healthy relationships. They transformed their grief into advocacy, determined that their daughter's story would prevent others from suffering similar fates. The apartment complex installed sound detection systems and emergency alert protocols. Residents formed neighborhood watch groups focused on welfare checks rather than surveillance. Counseling services were expanded. Conversations about responsibility and intervention became part of community culture. Still, for many, the most haunting question remained unanswered. Could this have been prevented? Neighbors recalled hearing arguments in the past and dismissing them as couple problems. Friends remembered Hannah downplaying Marcus's jealousy as just insecurity. Professors remembered her mentioning stress without elaboration. Each memory became a quiet indictment of collective inaction. Experts emphasized that such tragedies rarely result from single failures, but rather from accumulated moments when concern is overridden by convenience, discomfort, or denial. Hannah's death, they argued, was not only the result of one man's actions, but of a social ecosystem that failed to intervene. In her final months, Hannah had been preparing applications for graduate programs in environmental science, dreaming of working in conservation research. She had spoken about traveling, teaching, and building a life defined by curiosity and independence. Those dreams ended in apartment 312, but their echoes continued through the lives she touched. Today, a small plaque hangs in the courtyard of the complex bearing her name and a simple inscription: "Her voice still speaks." And it does. Through court transcripts, through recordings, through advocacy, through memory, through every conversation sparked by her story. Hannah Miller did not die unnoticed. She left evidence. She left truth. She left impact. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think differently about the people around you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments, because your engagement helps keep these stories alive and helps spread awareness that can save lives. And as you leave this video, remember this: silence is not neutrality. Ignoring warning signs is not kindness. And love without respect is never love at all.